talking about Azure, how to administer Azure virtual machine. I mean, virtual machine is a very good topic, and how to administer it into a real life environment will be one of our key steps. I remember the last time we talked about what virtual machine is and how virtual machine is came into existence and why people are very passionate about it. So the first question I'll ask you, I will say on this course here is what is a virtual machine? A virtual machine is like a computer inside your own personal computer. It runs its own operating system and application, right? But it shares physical hardware like your laptop or desktop, whatever you are using, physical hardware like CPU, storage, memory, and the likes of the host machine, that is of your personal laptop. Think of it as a fake computer, for example. That's what we call a virtual machine. It's a fake computer, a computer that you can't see physically, but you can see how it's operating, right? So on the learning side of it, we are going to discuss the learning objective. We are going to talk introduction to Azure virtual machines, and we are going to how to configure virtual machine availability. When you talk about virtual machine availability, we are talking about uptime availability. That is high level availability. That means no matter, regardless of any incident or havoc within a region, the virtual machine must be available 99.9%. So we are going to talk about high availability of virtual machines, and then we're going to do some lab, how to manage virtual machines and all. Overall, we are going to, if you are doing this virtual machine whiteboard, how you can connect to virtual machine, what you have inside virtual machine, and the kind of operating system, which are the image. And you can use your own custom image, that is your own custom operating system if you want, depending on your choice or by design of any organization that you work for. So let's go straight to its introduction to virtual machine. And then if you are taking the AZ-104 exams, I think these are the learning curves or learning objectives, I'll put it this way, you get for this, that will come out during the exams. So you have to, if you are going to take the AZ-104, which is Azure Administrator, you are going to concentrate more on this topic to be able to ace or pass your exams. And that's that. Let's go back to the next slide here. And this is like a review we've talked before of your cloud service responsibility, who is responsible for this, who is responsible for that. I think we did this during the 900 introduction to Azure Cloud Service. And all of this, let's go to our next slide here. We're going to talk how to plan your virtual machine. Like I said, if you're planning your virtual, if you want to deploy a virtual machine, you have to first plan it. You start with the network, right? Which network do you want to use? That's it, over the internet. You name the virtual machines. You choose the location of where you want your virtual machine to be operating from, be it Canada Central or West US or whatever region you choose. You locate the virtual machine to be close as possible to be as close as possible to your own personal, to your users, to ensure compliance and legal obligations. And then you also consider the pricing. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is a virtual machine? Like I said, a virtual machine is like a computer inside your computer, right? It runs its own operating system and application, but it shares physical hardware like CPU, memory, storage. All of this are of your host machine, that is of your personal machine. Like I said, think of it like like a fake computer. So a virtual machine is something you cannot see the physical computer, but you can see it operating itself. So like I said, it's like a fake computer. Why do people, another question I'll ask is, why do people need to plan virtual machine? So before creating a virtual machine, the first thing you need to plan, the virtual machine because resources are limited. Your physical computer or cloud account has limited CPU, RAM, or storage. So cost also matters when you want to plan your virtual machine. The cost matters, and in the sense that in the cloud environment like AWS or Azure, every virtual machine costs money. So if you are going to need a high availability virtual machine, it's going to cost you money. And then you also look at performance. Why do people need virtual machine? Because of performance-wise, because sometimes your physical computer might not perform the way the virtual machine does. So that is why it is needed. So what another question you would ask yourself when planning the virtual machine is, what does planning actually involve? What does planning involve during when setting up or planning the virtual machine? The first purpose is, what will the virtual machine do? What do you want the virtual machine to do? Do you want to run a web server, a database server, or a testing environment? It all depends on you or the organization you work for, and what type of operating system. If you want to use your own personal operating system you built by yourself or by an organization, all of these have to be determined by your choice. And then another thing you need to talk again is the size of and resources when planning a virtual machine. How much CPU or RAM or disk space do you want in a virtual machine? So when you are planning a virtual machine, for example, you need to look at, okay, I want a virtual machine that has at least 64 bits, right? A 64-bit virtual machine RAM space, which shows that machine might be super fast. And then I might choose my RAM. That is for my RAM. And then what kind of CPU is it? Quad-core CPU memory CPU you want, processing speed, and the disk space you want. Most computer comes with 1 terabyte. So because you run the virtual machine, you want to use to store large volume of data, you can have up to 2 terabyte, 10 terabyte, depending on your choice. So it costs money to do all of that. Let's go back to so another thing again that we will talk about when planning virtual machine is the security side of it, right? How will you protect it? Through firewalls, updates, and use permissions. I mean, when you set up permissions, it restricts so many things. You set up public access so that people cannot access that virtual machine. I mean, when you do a lot of things, and then you can also create a backup and recovery. Should there be any someone try to hack into your virtual machine, for example, it is very easy to also protect and set up a backup and recovery, more or less like a disaster recovery in a different region. That would help to save. So, for example, imagine if you want to host a small website, right? You plan one virtual machine with either Linux or Windows, depending on you. You are going to use 2 CPU, 4 gig RAM minimum, at least 20 gig of storage. You will decide its needs for internet, and then you can set up a firewall. So you can estimate the cost and make sure your hardware or cloud budget can handle it. So when you do all of that, you have planned a successful virtual machine. So let's go back to our next slide here, and then we'll talk about how do you determine a virtual machine sizing. Now, if you look at this chart here, they have different virtual machine type and description. On the general purpose, it's a balanced CPU to memory ratio, and then for compute optimized, a high CPU to memory ratio. Memory optimized, it has high memory to CPU ratio. So now, when you talk about determining virtual machine sizing, right, it means figuring out how big or powerful your virtual machine should look like based on what you need. For example, if you let's break it down. For example, let's say when you create a virtual machine, which is a VM, you will need to choose the CPU power. That is how fast it can be. You need to choose the RAM, and you can choose how much data can handle at once, right? You need to choose the storage, how much space it has, how much space or file that can go into it. You need to also choose the networking capacity, which means how fast it can communicate, right? So this is called sizing. This is actually called sizing. So the sizing itself is deciding the right size of your virtual machine. And when you look at it, when you say by type, now when we're talking about by type right now is you choose the cloud provider, be it AWS or Azure or GCP or Oracle Cloud or IBM Cloud, whatever cloud it is, right? Whatever cloud offers a predefined virtual machine size or are being called types, right? So a general purpose is your balanced CPU memory, just as you have on the screen there. Let's go to our next slide here. So by description, you can choose to say whether by a RAM, you can choose to let's say if I need a virtual machine for a small website, you might choose a CPU of 2 CPUs and 4 GB RAM. If I say I need a virtual machine for big data analysis, right, you might need a 16 CPU, right, and then a 64 GB RAM, which means it shows that that computer is a super fast computer. But also it all boils down to your kind of budget that you want. So there are different steps to determine the virtual machine size. The first thing first is to understand the workload, and then understand the workload means what will the virtual machine run. That is it a web application? Is it a database? Is it an AI model? So all of this will determine how the workload will be. Then you estimate the resource need. For example, when you talk about resource need, you talk about light tax, that is a small VM, or you talk about heavy tax, which is more or less like a large VM. So you need to match the VM type, like a general purpose compute optimized memory, and then you need to either choose how you want it to be. Then a simple example, small blog site, like if you own a blog site and and people are always visiting that blog site, for example, you can use a general purpose virtual machine which has just one CPU, 2 GB RAM, and then that can take you to do more. And then if you are let's say you are running a video rendering service, you can need a compute optimized VM, which takes about like a 6 CPU and then like a 16 GB RAM of size. If you need a large database, let's say you have a company like let's say you have a company like let's say Iroko TV now, because the people who have come to those register those services, they have so many database of information. So you will need like a 4 CPU size and then a 32 gig of RAM size. So all of this is just to determine the size of a virtual machine. Moving to our next slide here, we're going to talk about, so when you're determining the storage size, each of these talks about your disk memory. A virtual machine can have up to 3 to 4 different or memory space. You can have OS disks, temporary disks, a data disk. You can convert all of that to become what? A blob storage in Azure, for example, right? So this is just a typical chart that you see here on the screen. Going to our next slide here, we're going to demonstrate how to create a database, a virtual machine, for example. So it is pretty simple. Let me quickly go to my Azure portal. If you can see my screen. Okay, yeah. So can you see my screen? Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I can. I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay, you can see the Azure portal. So this is the Azure portal, for example. You want to create a virtual machine, and because I already typed VM, so you can just come here and say VM, virtual machine, and then you see the kind of virtual machine you want to create. So this is a typical example of how you want to create a virtual machine. When you come and click create, it gives you options. Now, Microsoft Azure has upgraded some size of virtual machines, how you want to create. So they give you options and tell you if you want to create just a simple virtual machine, best for low traffic workloads. You just do simple things to save things or for testing, control, highly customized apps, operating systems or file. If your workload or traffic starts to grow, then you can upgrade to virtual machine skill set. The virtual machine skill set is like an opportunity for you to increase the size as your company or your management continue to grow from 1 to 1,000. You can have up to 1 to 1,000 VM size, no added cost. Just include multiple VM size, the zones, the regions, the domain, and then you can set up all of this. You can choose how you want to be. A preset virtual machine is like a configured virtual machine designed for optimized memory and the capacity for general use. So you can deploy it. You can deploy it as it is, or you can customize it as it is. Then a hybrid pre-configured high volume is for maybe, for example, you have an on-premise environment and you want to also have a virtual machine in the cloud. So Microsoft Azure comes with what they call a Azure Arc. An Azure Arc hybrid is like using both your resources in the cloud, and also you can also replicate that I mean, use your on-premise VM, and also you can create that in cloud. That is, if you don't have money, you can just use more or less like a hybrid, which means you are running on-premise and cloud resources in Azure. So, so because we are creating a simple virtual machine, I could just quickly select the first one, which is virtual machine. Let's wait for it to load, and then it's okay. I have my account. I didn't create any resource group because I deleted one, so I can just quickly create one. Let's say we'll call it AZ104 class. AZ104 class. Okay, no, that's the one. Let's say, okay, let's see AZ104 dash class, right? And then that's it. AZ104 class, and then this is my this is our new resource group. But if you already have resource group, you don't need to create one. But because I don't have any right now, I deleted them, so I just want to create a new one. Let's say we want to create our virtual machine name. We can say AZ dash class, right? We can say AZ class VM, right? Okay, I can use dash VM, AZ class dash VM. So this is our virtual machine name. Let me set it to West US availability zones. It has, and then yes, if I want to select any availability zone, I can select. So when you select high availability zone, it means that whenever this virtual machine crash, so if that zone that you selected crashes, it means that if you have any region that is, if you have a high availability zone, it will go back to, it will connect you to that zone and continue to work, which means your uptime high availability will be like 99.9%, which means there will be no failure or downtime when you use this. So and the more you do this, the more money it costs for you. I mean, that's the option. If you can determine whether you want your security type to be trusted by virtual machine or just leave it pretty standard. On this part here, I can select the operating system. Let's say we want to use Windows Server 2025. Or we can just set up a simple Windows 11 Pro operating system. I think that's pretty cheaper. Then our username and password. I can quickly create a username and password, or let me say, give it welcome at 1. Welcome at, okay, let me call it, our username is AZ class, AZ-class. Our password, we can say welcome at 1. 1 second. Welcome, sorry, at 1, and then we can put the same password here, welcome at 1. So it means that the password must be at least between 12. Okay, so I have to change it to welcome AZ class. At 1. Welcome to AZ class at 1. To AZ class at 1. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the password match, and then do you want to make a public inbound? You want to set up RDP, that is remote desktop protocol, which means you can use a different machine and connect to it, or we can just, you want to make it public. By design, when creating a virtual machine, we do not allow public ports, because when you do that, they might easily hack into your virtual machine when you do that, and that computer or that infrastructure is prone to serious threats. So we can set up RDP, SSH, or we can remove RDP. We can put HTTPS, that is 443, and then, I mean, any one of these you want to select, you can decide your choice, and then I confirm that I'm eligible to use Windows 10 multi-tenant, blah, 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 and then go to our next. You want to select your disk size. Okay, welcome easy class at all. Okay, you want to select your operating system disk size. You can leave it at 127 gigabytes, premium SSD, and right now I think they have different. They have local redundant storage. They have standard best storage. So we can just leave it on premium SSD, for example, and then your key management, let it be managed by the platform, which is by Azure, and then we can enable disk compatibility, or we leave that on its own. Advanced is when you want to add more disks to it and all of that, but we don't want to do that. I can just go to the networking side of it and select if you want to add a VNet, a subnet, whatever thing you want to add. But I can ignore all of this one here. By design, it's going to create a new VNet for me. And then I can just choose, okay, NIC, make it basic, public, no, none. I can put all of this here, and then delete public IP, blah, blah, blah. When you delete the VM, you can select this. So when you delete public IP and network interface card, when you check this, it means that as soon as you're done with this VM, when you delete it, it automatically deletes the network interface card and the public IP. So you can check this if you want, and then you can enable accelerating networking, all of this. So when you're creating an Azure VM, for example, and you see this sign in between, right? Try to use your mouse and look at it. So enable accelerated networking. What does it mean? Sometimes you might not be aware of it. Take your mouse and, okay, now enable accelerated networking means that it enables latency and high throughput on the network interface, right? So all of these things you can find information, a load balancer, what type of load balancer do you want to use, none of them. So you can select anything you want to use on it. Let's just go ahead and create a simple VM, and then let's see if it passes. Okay, so it did not pass. We need to add something to our VM. 1 second. Basic. Oh, this platform I have does not have access to select this level. So let me go and choose a VM that doesn't cost that much. Region East US. Let's see. It still doesn't have that. I need to change the region. Let me look for South Africa, for example. West. Did it pass? Okay, so because of my accounts, I don't know. Maybe I'll leave that. No, so we can leave that and then proceed to our slide. I think my account has restrictions. So my subscription is.
Sure, no problem. I can handle that at the end of the class. I can do a simple lab just to explain everything. Just go over the slides, then I can do that.
Okay. Let me just quickly go back to the class. So I'll leave the demonstration for now. So, and then I'll show now. Because why I'm doing this, because I wanted to show you how Bastion is being connected, which means you can just connect your Microsoft operating system or any virtual machine. You can connect it on just a browser click, right? Which means you can be going to an operating system on a browser. You can use a different Windows or a VM or a virtual machine in another virtual machine. Right? So RODP, you can use a different computer. You can be from another location and then connect to RODP, SSH, sudo SSH, and all of that. So I'll leave that. Let's go over to our next slide. How do you connect a virtual machine? If you look at this diagram here, it shows you how you can connect to a virtual machine. So if you have a Linux, Mac, or Windows, right? And then the first step you do is you as a person, the user, you sign in, right? Once you sign into the Azure portal, you use the internet port 443. Once you connect, and then you use Bastion to connect. So when you're using Bastion, you can also use a private IP by using RODP or SSH, or the RODP or SSH. The port numbers are for 3389 and for 22 is for SSH. So when you connect to those VM, you can see the target VM. In this diagram here, it shows that they have multiple VM, which is VM A, virtual machine A, virtual machine B, and C. And then if you have a private virtual network for security reasons, you can set all of this as well. So let's go to our next slide here. And so here, a full recap of what we just talked about is introduction to virtual machines, what virtual machine is. Remember, a virtual machine is like a fake computer inside another computer. It's a computer inside another computer. We talk about how to provision a virtual machine or a Linux virtual machine in Microsoft Windows, Azure, how to create a VM in Azure, how to create a Windows virtual machine in Azure, how to connect to a virtual machine through Azure Portal or using Bastion, Azure Bastion. So all of this, I'll leave that for the demo session. Let's go to our next slide that talks about how to configure virtual machine availability. Remember, I talked about availability. For me, availability is ensure that this computer is always available. So imagine a situation where, for example, you have a virtual machine, for example, and you do not select high availability zones. Now, and then on that region, Microsoft alerted people from that region and say, hey, we have issues for this particular region. How do you check for if your status is okay in a particular Azure region? Let me show you a simple, you can come in here and say status, Azure status. So when you come to Azure status, you can come in here and check if all the zones are the health. So if any of the zones or region has high impact or critical impact, you will see this sign. Now this is the chart here on the website, and you can tell you if every region is fine. So let's say you're always working with Middle East and Africa. Now if you come here, you can see that Azure Compute VM Fleet, it gives you options for all of this. Anyone you see that with a red mark, a sign or warning sign, it means that that region might be having issues and all of that. So you can come in here and check a whole lot of things and see the status of every resources that runs in Azure, in Microsoft Azure, to ensure that these resources are working perfectly well. It does not have a global impact or a regional impact. All of this you can check from Azure status, all from your browser. It is very simple. It's easy to go through. Just go to azure.status.microsoft.com, or you can just go to the browser or Google and type Azure status, just the way I did, and it will take you to the Azure status. You can check for any region. You can set the time every 30 minutes to see which region is impacted. If you work in the China region, or if you're using Azure.gov, which means a governmental Azure, you're using the Azure government, you can go to that government and check is it the US government, so basically Microsoft Azure is very work hand in hand with the US government. So if you work for US government, for example, you can check all of these status to see whether any of their sites or services has been impacted through that region. So it is easy to understand all of this. Let's go to our next slide here. So it's easy when we talk about how to configure a virtual machine availability. We are talking about how well the availability of that services or virtual machine is up for use. So on this note, what we have on the screen here is configure Azure virtual machine availability. The introduction part is, these are the part, about 20 to 25% of these questions will come out in Azure with AZ 104 when you're planning to write the professional exams. So you plan you plan for maintenance downtime, plan for how to set up availability set. I'm going to discuss that. You're going to review how the Azure, you're going to review update and fault domain. I'm going to also talk about that. We're going to talk about review how availability zones work. And then we're going to compare what they call vertical to horizontal scaling. I mean, a vertical to horizontal scaling is something that they use on a day-to-day basis in every infrastructure. I mean, we're going to talk about that. So we're going to demonstrate, we're going to show you how to create and configure scaling. It's very simple from the Azure portal. We're going to demonstrate a virtual machine scaling as well. And then we're going to bring Azure innovation to your hybrid environment, talking about Azure Arc. Remember, I told you previously that Azure Arc is a new technology by Microsoft Azure. Although it has existed, but now they modernize it. If you don't have money for to put your resources in the cloud, I think you can pay a little or no money or so, or thereabout. I'll check the status, and then you can connect your on-premise infrastructure to Microsoft Azure Cloud to just more or less like an infrastructure replication, to have what you have in your private cloud to the public cloud, to be able to keep things balanced for you and all of that. That's how the hybrid cloud works. Let's go back to our next slide here, and we'll talk about plan for maintenance and downtime. Now, when we talk about plan for maintenance and downtime, the first question we'll ask yourself is, sometimes when a computer automatically shut down, for example, unplanned hardware maintenance, you'll see all of this message if you use Server 2003 or any of Microsoft resources or the services in the cloud. All of these things we'll talk about it. So a maintenance is, when we talk about plan for maintenance downtime, we're talking about, it means that we are preparing for times when the virtual machine itself or system will not be available, right? Because of maintenance or unexpected issues. That's why we're talking about plan for maintenance downtime. Let's break it down to this part where, for example, what is a maintenance? What is maintenance and downtime? First, the first question is, you are going to break it into two, right? What is maintenance? Maintenance is like work done to keep system healthy, like updates, repairs, or upgrades, right? When, like, for example, when you use your banking app, sometimes they send you a message and say, hey, a particular bank is using its service is under maintenance. You will not be able to send and receive money. Please hold on for a period of 10 minutes. They can give an extended ETA time, right? So all of these things is kind of like maintenance. So a downtime is when your system or virtual machine is not working or accessible. So all of these things are a service that we need to understand and works with most virtual machines. So type of maintenance and downtime, for example, we have the, like I said, we have the planned maintenance downtime, we have the unplanned hardware maintenance, and we have the unexpected. The unexpected one is you did not expect it, right? So the planned one is you schedule for, it's a scheduled work that you know about, for example, in advance. Let's say maintenance will be done by 12 midnight GMT or GMT time, right? You could set your time, you could set this a planned service in a virtual machine, or even your physical computer, that, hey, I want to shut down this computer for a particular time. Nobody can use it. Once we are done working with all of this service, the computer should restart. The computer should come back to normalcy and people can start using it. So that's what we talk about planned maintenance, right? So example is updating your software every Sunday night, 12 p.m. Most banks does it. Most companies most people who render services to users, right? They do all of these things. They do what they call planned maintenance. So those are part of services that you can understand, you can use in a virtual machine. And on planned hardware maintenance, you're talking about like fixing a physical problem that happens. And on plan, you did not plan for it. It just happened, and then people need to get on board and start working on it. Imagine you are using your service, internet service, for example, and all of a sudden your internet is down, and it's like an unplanned service. Maybe one trailer or something went and ditch exploded, and then it affected some of the fiber cable on the ground. What will happen? It will affect the internet user in that region. So it's an unplanned hardware maintenance. They did not plan for it. So what are they going to do? They have to go get their engineering team and then try to set an ETA, the amount of time that they're going to get the whole thing sorted out, and ensure that people go back to use their service easy, simple, and just a level of simplicity when using their service and all of that. So an unplanned hardware maintenance is more or less like you're fixing a problem, a physical problem that suddenly happened. I just give you an example. For example, maybe a hard drive failure, something failed, and then it's an unplanned service. You did not plan for it. Machines can break anytime, any day, right? Just the way humans die. We did not plan for death. I'm sorry, it's an unforeseen circumstances Same way it happens to computer and all of that, right? It's an unplanned hardware maintenance. So that's just, we can fall sick any point in time, and then we did not plan for that, right? So it's more or less like the same thing happens to computer. So an unexpected downtime, when we talk about unexpected downtime, for example, is like when a system goes down without warning. The computer just shut down, power outage, network failure, all of these things are on unplanned downtime. Example can be like your virtual machine crashes. A VM can crash, yes. Before a VM will crash, I mean, in Azure, it will be giving you a warning sign. A notification is popping up like CPU memory is 100%, storage is 99.9%. I mean, a whole lot of things that you need to stop or you scale. When you say scale up, means you are adding more space. For example, you have 1 gigabyte of space, and then this 1 gigabyte of space is filled up. You can scale it up, which means add more, 2 gig, 3 gig, or 20 gig, so that you don't have a limited space, right? So you can scale up a services in Microsoft Azure. So that's what we call scale set. When you hear VM scale set, we're talking about whenever the sizes is full or is getting impacted, you can scale it up for a faster and more reliable system. So that's what we're talking about unexpected downtime. So why plan for this? When Microsoft Azure tell you, why do you plan for this? If you don't plan, your application or website or services could go offline and users will be frustrated, right? So planning helps you in achieving a reduced downtime. When you plan, it helps you to get like a reduced downtime, inform users ahead of time, right? When you plan for something, it means, hey, our service will be going down at 12 midnight. Please, you will not be able, it will be unusable, or will not be able to be, you won't be able to use it at that point in time. And then from 1 a.m. in the morning, you'll be able to use all of that. So you plan for a service, right? When it comes to maintenance and downtime, that's that about it. I don't know. So how to plan for it? The first thing first is you schedule a planned maintenance, you create a backup. Always create backup, because every infrastructure has a backup. You create a backup, use what they call redundancy. A redundancy we are talking about is extra servers, extra virtual machines, right? So if one server or virtual machine fail or break down, another will take over instantly without a blink of an eye, with a blink of an eye, and without you, the user, noticing, right? It happens when you use this OPay, PanPay, they have what they call high redundancy, if you don't know. So that's where high availability comes into play. So for example, where you are using all of this, you don't know, you, the user, you don't know what is happening, but there's a redundancy at the back end that's happening, that when one system fails, the other picks up immediately. People start using it with speed of light, and you like, oh, this service is good, but you don't know what is happening back end. So that's where the use of redundancy comes into play. Another thing is communicate to your users about planned downtime. Remember, I said banks, you do send information to our email and saying their service will be usable at this point in time, from a time period of time to this time, due to a particular issue happening. So it's a planned service. That's how to plan. So if you're an infrastructure guy, you need to learn how to plan very well in the Azure environment. So another thing is system monitoring. You need to monitor your system. That's why we talk about system monitoring in the early stage of AZ 104, and it's something that it's a day-to-day routine. You will continue using it, be it you're using public cloud, private cloud, or any government cloud. For example, you are meant to maintain monitor systems at any point in time. People work in the bank, in the hospitals, people work in any organization, they have how to monitor systems, right? So a simple example is you run an online shop, for example. You can plan updates every Sunday midnight, plan maintenance. You can keep your backup server in the case of system crashes or all of that. You can send emails to customers just the way bank does, right? So that's how you plan for maintenance and downtime. Let's go back to our next slide here and set up availability set. Now, remember when I was trying to create a VM for you, you need to set up, when you talk about set up availability set, for example, when you look at the screen here, when you set up availability set, you are referring to like making sure your virtual machine, which is your VM, stay online even if something goes wrong. Even if, remember when they say Azure was down, I think 2 weeks ago. Now, so please remind me, was it 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago? A service is down due to DNS, blah blah blah, something within that particular region, right?
Yeah,
So
it was Azure Front Door. Azure Front Door went down globally 3 weeks ago.
okay, so if you have set up a high availability set, regardless of what is going to happen, let me tell you the honest truth. Your system uptime will be 99.9, which means it keeps running regardless of anything. So let's break it down for you guys to understand what's an availability set and why availability set is very important in a high-end infrastructure environment for most enterprise people, most enterprise organizations, banks and hospitals, people who have high data centers use high availability set just in case one of their resources or services break down. And availability set is a feature commonly used in cloud like Microsoft Azure, AWS, GCP, right? And that group of your virtual machine is to like more or less like is to be available so that it's to be available to be placed on different physical servers. Why is it important to use it? If one server fails, for example, right, or is being maintained, or you're managing this server now, right, the VM virtual machine will keep running, which means that it prevents your entire application from going offline, right? It prevents your application from going offline. Availability set you're talking about is ensure that they have plenty VMs. If you when you talk about, I want to create 3 availability sets, it means that you have your particular VM and 3 extra VMs. If your main VM fails, it will move to the next set. Or if you're maintaining or managing that first VM or upgrading it, the next VM will continue working on any service running on that VM. Nobody will notice it, right? Because why? They set up an availability set. So why do we need an availability set? That's the first question you will ask yourself. So imagine you have 2 virtual machines running on your website. If both of the VM are on the same physical server, right, and the server crashes, your site will go down. It means that your site will go down as in entirely. So if the VMs are in an availability set, it means that they are on a different servers, and so if one fails, the other would still continue to work without anybody noticing. I hope I'm making sense, guys. So
yeah, so if I can just come in on this, all right. When it comes to availability set and availability zone, the one thing to note is that's what Microsoft calls update domain and fault domain. So if you look at it here, I say update domain and fault domain. So by default, if you create a VM, everything is inside one rack. One rack is basically a server rack. Everything is copied inside one server rack, inside one data center. So the whole idea of availability is Microsoft saying, hey, can you replicate if you create a VM, it creates 3 instances. Those 3 instances are inside one rack. So one Microsoft is trying to do here, I'm going to say, hey, by default, we have 3 instances for you available. So if one should crash, we can bring up another one. But what happens if the whole rack crashes? That means you get to lose your server. So the whole idea of fault domain and update domain and availability set is saying, hey, instead of it being on one server, can I put it on different servers in the same data center? So the whole idea is saying, hey, if Microsoft wants to do updates, we all receive updates on our laptops. Sometimes there are firmware updates that require a restart. If Microsoft wants to do updates and then you still need the service to be available, at least you can bring up the service on another server. That's what Microsoft is trying to do. The next thing to point out clearly again is the idea of availability zone. It's nothing different, right? The difference between availability zone and availability set is basically the data centers that they are in. So we talked about that. Hey, Microsoft has regions, and they have regions, and they have inside the region they have multiple data centers. So when you go to availability zone, Microsoft is saying, hey, I'm going to place this server in different data centers that make up a particular region. So that means if I create a server in West Europe, for example, now it's going to be one instance might be in a data center in Netherlands, one instance might be another data center in Germany, one might be another center in Belgium. So they're going to split it into 3 different data centers, not the same data center. So if anything should happen that the whole of Netherlands is off, your VM doesn't go down. That's the whole idea of availability sets and availability zones. So it's all about maintenance. So depending on what you set, that would tell me, hey, if Microsoft is performing updates, they're not going to perform updates on 2 servers that are the same that are in the same update domains. No, they're going to do it in 2 different. They're going to take time because there is an update domain configured. Okay, thank you. Please continue.
All right, thank you so much. So overall, the overall is an availability set means that there will be 99.95% of SLA, service level agreement, which means the uptime will always be there for you. So let's go back to our next slide here. Go to my next slide here, and then we'll talk about how to review updates and fault domain. Remember, he has just talked about fault. I will just quickly discuss on this. So when you talk about a fault domain, or how does a fault domain work? So, and I believe that availability set had 2 concepts, right? 2 different concepts. One is the fault domain, and the other one is the update domain. A fault domain, think of it like, for example, these are separate physical racks on servers, which he just explained to you right now, right? VMs in different fault domain won't fail together. That's what it means. And then an update domain, for example, this controls like a planned maintenance. Let's say, for example, VM in different update domains won't be updated at the same time, right? Which he just explained to you. So at least one VM stays online while the other one updates. So steps to set them up: you in your Azure cloud, you create an availability set, which is what we discussed in our previous slide, and then you add your VMs to the set when creating them. Remember, as I talked about, when you are creating your virtual machines, it gives you options to create an availability set, right? See, look at this here now. On where is it? Hold on a second. I think I passed it. So now it gives you options. You want to create an availability set, virtual machine scale set, an availability set. You can see that here. You can select all of that. And so based on your inputs, you might want to consider creating a resources on a virtual machine scale set, which allows you to manage and configure scale load balance virtual machine. Load balance. It's called VMS. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in our slide. So I mean, all of these things you're going to get a bit of understanding. So that's what an update domain or fault domain. Update domain allows you to perform incremental role, blah, blah, blah on it. So, I mean, we just discussed all of this. This is something that you guys need to take note of. I mean, if you work in a cloud environment or as a cloud administrator, you'll be you use this every blessed day. I mean, availability zones will be part and parcel of what you do at every point in time. So if you run an online store, you can create 2 VMs in an availability set, which means if Azure places them on different servers and updates different schedules, if one server fails or gets updated, the other VM would for your store will continue to work, and without you or the users or people who use those services would not notice what is going on. But they will all keep on saying, their service is so fast, everything works hand in hand. I know some of you, when you use OPay and all these fintech banks payment solution, you notice that some of their services are so swift. Imagine you do a transaction from OPay, it goes within a blink of an eye, right? Before you say I've sent it, the money has been there, right? So these are it's just how availability set works. So people used to say, oh, this service is fast. You don't know what is going on back end. So these are things that you guys need to understand when you talk about an availability set and talking about fault domain and all of that, right? So let's go back to our next slide here. We review availability zones. He just talked about it. I mean, an availability zone is something that he talked about, but it's something I would like to just talk about again. So when you say you want to review an availability zones, for example, we are referring to understanding how cloud providers like Microsoft Azure, right, AWS or GCP, or so particularly Microsoft Azure, to how they keep your applications running, even if part of their maintained infrastructure it fails, right? Let's explain it for example, like what is an availability zone, right? An availability zone, which is AZ, is a separate physical location. Now, so just explain that to you within a cloud region, right? Each zone has its own power, cooling, networking, blah, blah, blah. Zones are connected to each other, right? With high-speed links. High-speed links. Think of it, for example, like if a cloud region is a city, then the availability zones are different neighbors, right? In that city, each neighbor has its own utility, right? So if a neighborhood loses power, the other will still work. That is what it means. So why do we need an availability zones, for example? If you put all your servers in one zone, that zone fails due to power outage or disaster, your app will officially goes down, right? Whatever service you're running will go down regardless, because you put everything in one zone. So by spreading your servers in multiple zones, it means that if one server fails, others will keep running. Your service will be smooth, seamless. Your application will stay available without, the users will not know. They will keep on praising you, right? So, I mean, old generation bank need to do better. Yes, we see all of these things back and we know old generation bank need to do better in terms of services, in terms of speed, simplicity, and all of that, right? So the new generation bank are coming up, they are seeing the loopholes, and they are getting along with the to improve the market or the fintech, the banking industry, and all of that. So all of this, your infrastructure needs to be on a top notch. They run on different cloud servers. If you don't know, most of them run in Azure. I will tell you for free because I know. So that's that. So how it works is cloud providers itself usually offers at least 3 zones per region. 3 zones. Remember, I said if you go to the Azure cloud now, you'll see it will give you 3 zones per region. So you can select which zones do you want to use. So now it give you 3 zones because availability set. Okay, there are 3 zones. Where is it? Because due to my subscription, I think I don't have all of that, so I'll just ignore that. So it gives you 3 zones per region, right? And you can deploy your virtual machines or services across that zones, or those zones rather. So this gives you like a high availability and a disaster recovery. A disaster recovery, which means if there's a disaster, it will recover from me and continue working. Without you, people will not notice anything, right? So let's go back to our next slide. Guys, I hope I'm making sense, right? So let's go back to our next slide. Let's talk about compare to vertical to horizontal scaling. I mean, when you talk about vertical to horizontal scaling, this is something that in your day-to-day routine as a cloud engineer or whatever it is, you will need to talk about this on a day-to-day routine. You need to talk about how they work, how they improve. So a vertical scaling or scale up and scale down is the process of increasing or decreasing power to a single instance, vertical, straight to a single instance, right, of a workload. Usually it's a manual process. And horizontal scaling is like a process where you increase or decrease a number of instances of your workload, frequently automated. You see that it is very simple. So sometimes I know most organizations run on most high-end use horizontal scaling. Everything is automated, right? Which means there is no going to manually remove doing a manual process and all of that. Most companies, most enterprise high-end organizations uses horizontal scaling. I tell you for free. No, you will not see people going to use the vertical scaling because sometimes they have their own pros and cons and all of that. Let's go over to our next slide here that talks about how to create and configure an auto scaling, right? This is it. I'll leave the demo for so, and then I'll move to our next slide. And then after this session, we'll talk about how to go about the demo itself. Now, on this part here, we are talking about bring Azure innovation to your hybrid environment with Azure Arc. Take note, if you have chance, you can read about Azure Arc, you can find out what Azure Arc is and all of that. But on this session here, I'm going to explain what is Azure Arc, what you need to understand, and why it is easy, right, to understand how Azure Arc means. So what does this mean, right? It means that you can use Azure Arc cloud tools and features even if your servers or application are not fully in the cloud. And Azure Arc is a technology that makes this possible, right? When all your resources, your infrastructure, all of these are not in the cloud, you can see why you have a private cloud. You can use Azure Arc. It means that you can replicate your resources like more or less to work like an hybrid. A key concept of it is an hybrid environment, right? This is when your IT set up a mix of on-premise servers, right, to which is your office or data center, and then to the cloud service in like Azure. Microsoft Azure provide Azure Cloud. I mean, I think they are the first of a kind to do that right now, because most people are running into Azure because of all of this. Now people are having so many loss in terms of business and managing business and all of that. In terms of managing infrastructure, which is your private cloud, it is good to have your own private cloud, but not all resources to be in one data center. It is always good to replicate your infrastructure in the cloud, just in case. You never can tell. There might be physical damage, right? And you need operations to continue. So it is always good to run a hybrid cloud, just in case. In fact, all banks that I know, GT Bank, I am very certain, because when they started that data center, I was there, I saw it physically. I was part and parcel of some of the things being set up there. So I saw it physically that they run a hybrid cloud, which means that they have their own physical data center and they have a replicated one in the cloud, right? So think of it like an Azure innovation, for example, is like Azure offers you an advanced features like security, monitoring, automation, and AI service. All of this in as an Azure Arc does all of this for you. So it manages your entire environment of an existing non-Azure on-premise resource, manage your virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, databases, and if they are running in Azure, they will also be running on your on your data center. It uses familiar services like Azure service, like management capabilities, regardless of where your resources live. Whether your resources live in let's say in Boronu, where Boko Haram is, if your resources is there, your data center is there, Azure Arc will work seamlessly, which means you can replicate everything in the cloud. If they like, let them bomb that place, and the service will still run. So it used traditional IT operations, like while introducing DevOps practice to support new cloud native patterns in your environment. I mean, these are seamless things that you need to understand on all of this. So on the demonstration part, I'm going to leave all of that for now. So, and then we'll talk about, I'll leave a full recap of what we just discussed is configuring your virtual machine availability, introduction to Azure availability virtual machine skill set, how to build a scalable application with virtual machine skill set, and introduction to Azure Arc is what we just discussed and all of that. So on this note, I would say I'll leave the lab for now. So, and the lab virtual machines, and that will be all of this year are labs, and that will be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, guys. I'll leave that to now. So let me stop sharing my screen.
Hi, everyone. So let me quickly just share my screen, so maybe it will make sense. Some of the things we discussed so far should make sense. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. All right. So a few things to say. So before you create a VM, one of the things you need what? You need a subnet. You need a Azure before you create a VM, you need a VNet. So creating VMs, I can just go ahead and just, let me say I want to create an Ubuntu VM, for example. Let me choose this one, for example, now. Sorry, so I'm going to create it inside an existing resource group. I can just call this AZ104 because I don't want much, and choose region, right? I'm going to choose region. If I choose East US, for example, now it's going to create an East US. The next thing is availability zone, just like we discussed. Availability zone is all about, hey, how many, you can choose an availability zone or a virtual machine skill set or ability set, but I'm just going to leave ability zone. Say, hey, how many instances do you want to have at a particular time? This helps for replication. This helps to protect your VM in case a data center goes down. Also, this helps with your SLA, service level agreement. So it depends on the service level agreement you have with your service level agreement you have with your business, for example, a particular application. If you have a service agreement of 99.999 and 5, for example, so you're likely going to have SLA depleted SLA that basically explains this, that basically matches this. So if I go a bit further, the next is talk about, okay, zone, I'm going to leave it only zone one. I can select multiple zone, but I'm just going to leave only zone one. The next thing I'm going to look at image. Image is talking about what OS. That's just it simple. What OS do you want to create? Do you want to create Ubuntu? Do you want to create Windows? Do you want to create Windows 11 Pro, for example? Do you want to create Windows Server 2007? But I'm just going to go ahead with Ubuntu because I don't have much resources here, so I'm going to be minimized as possible. So the next is VM architecture. So are you going with x86, x64, or are you going with ARM64? So this is just basically saying, hey, um, which hardware type you want your VM to run on. So for example, MacBooks run on the ARM architecture. Some of our phones run on the ARM architecture. So if you go with this, for example, you're likely going to need to select a different image because it's not visible. So I'm just going to go with going to x64 and run with Ubuntu. Right. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Azure Spot. Azure Spot discount. What is about? Say, if you want to preserve, if I'm sure I'm going to run this VM for 2 years, for 3 years, I can go to Azure Spot and say, hey, I want to get some discount because I'm going to run this VM 247. So, but in this case, I'm not doing any of that. I'm just going to leave it like this. Next one is talking about the SKU, the size. So the size, just like Dominic mentioned, the size is all about what can you afford, right? What's the requirement of that VM? So he mentioned general purpose, which can say, hey, for all kind of resources, yeah, this is what you can go for. But beyond that, there are also ones that are specific. For example, now he mentioned the memory optimized. If I'm running a database now, wait. If I'm running a database now, I'm likely going to go for memory optimized because for databases, you are always charged depending on your what I'm going to say. For databases, you're always charged depending on let me just close this something. I might have to refresh for on the core of your CPU. So I need more memory. I can say I need more memory. I don't need more. I need more memory, but I don't need more CPU. So because I'm being licensed on CPU, I can get a 2 CPU with a 16 gig memory. That means I need to select a SKU that is optimized, right? And let me just exit the page and start afresh. Going back to the new VNet, create new VM. Choosing this just to go back to where we are before. So correct AZ104. I'm just going to AZ104. All right, so zone. So this was where we were before. So in this case, I'm going to go for something cheap. So this guy's $7 a month. So I don't want to spend more money, right? The next thing is about authentication type. If you're selecting a SQL a Linux server, you are expected to use either SSH key or password. For in this case, I'm just going to go with an SSH key with a password because I don't want to go through the stress of all the things. So I'm going to use the default thing is the let me call it caps of Azure, that one, Azure user. Azure user, I'm just going to type in a complex password. So there's two. Then the next is we allow ports. Say, hey, by default, if you create a VM, for you to access it, you need to be able, that port needs to be open. That port needs to be open on an NSG. So are you saying, are you going to allow all ports? Are you going to allow a specific port? So because I intend, just like last week, because I intend to host a website, so because I intend to host a website on this, I probably need to allow 80 or 443, or because I intend to be able to connect to it, I need to enable SSH, else I won't be able to connect to this VM. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next option, which is basically saying, right, let me just go back. It's talking about regions. I'm going to East US because maybe they're, let me try West Europe. Yeah, I'm going to go about disk, right? Next is about disk. So when I look at disk, talking about, okay, hey, what's the size of your OS disk? What's the size of your image disk? Do you want your disks to be a particular size? Do you want it to be, for if I want more than 30 gig, now by default it's 30 gig. If I want to be 64 gig, if I want to be 128 gig, I actually select it here. I'm just going to leave 30 gig. So we're talking about the next thing is about the OS disk size. So is it premium SSD? We look at premium when we're talking about storage. So is it going to be premium? And it's premium. Do I want it to be locally redundant? Do I want it to be zone redundant? Which is mean more money. It's like we have it saying, hey, better soup than money maker. So the more features you're adding to your VM, the more expensive it's going to be. So networking is going to talk about, okay, hey, because I'm creating it inside an existing VNet, it's going to basically create, it's going to basically create it in that VNet. So let me see, VNet West Europe, that's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is going to talk about network NIC. I'm using the basic NIC. I'm not using anything advanced. Again, I'm trying to keep the cost at a minimum. And yes, I want to allow some public port on the network security group, right? I can also check this to say, hey, whenever I delete this VM, can you delete the public IP address that it gets created with it, right? Do I want additional options? Do I want to attach this to a load balancer? We looked at load balancer last 2 weeks, whereby we even created a VM and saw the load balancer across two various VMs. Do I want to attach to the application gateway? I'm not doing any of those, so I'm just moving forward. So I'm just going to move forward to review and create. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and create this, guys. Let's see. So the VM is still creating. So far, it has created the network interface, the link, it's created the public IP address, it's created the NSG. It's good. Oh, it's successful. All right. So let's go to the resource. So this is the VM, for example. Now the VM is running. This is the public IP address of the VM. If I want to, don't make me mention about scaling. If I want to say, okay, hey, I choose the B1 series. If I'm not comfortable with this, if I want to go to something higher, I need to come to settings, ability, and scale, size this, and I can actually go here and say, okay, hey, I want to move from a B1 to B2. But just guys, remember, if you're moving from one to the other, it's going to be more money. For example, I'm using the B1S, which is one CPU, one RAM, 1 gig RAM, two data disks, and I'm basically paying this every month if I run this 247. If I want to scale up to this guy, for example, to two CPU, 8 gig RAM, four data disk, I'm going to go as well and be paying 70. Right. If I want to go with, say, so you can scale up or scale down. So depending on the needs of your application. If you want to automatically scale, then you need to add a VM as part of a skill set. So that way your VM, you can have what we call horizontal scaling. So for example, the idea of adding more resources, adding more resources on top of what you have is basically called vertical scaling. That means, hey, I have a VM that is 8 gig memory. I'm increasing it for 8 gig to 16 gig. That's the vertical. So if I want to increase it horizontally, that means I'm adding another instance of the same VM. So whenever you hear horizontal scaling and vertical scaling, think of it like, hey, okay, multiple instances of the VM, multiple instances of the VM, multiple instances of the VM in multiple instance of this VM is horizontal. Single instance, adding more resources on top of the single instance is basically vertical, right? So for right now, I'm going to leave it like this, but if you want to scale it, just go to availability plus scale and select the option to scale. I want to try and connect to this VM. I have the public IP address here. I'm not going to set up Azure bursting because, again, I'm running out of resources on this one. Well, let me set up do SSH. If I want to do SSH, then what I need to do is I can do SSH from PowerShell. I don't need to do SSH, right? If I do SSH, it's going to ask me, hey, select what you want to connect. So I'm going to do SSH. The username is with the Azure user, then the public IP address, right? Public IP address. I'm going to do Azure user at what? 20.135.25.135. But let me just paste it. Total 165, right? So it's going to say yes. I have to access the fingerprint. It's going to ask me for my password. So you need to remember the password that you use, basically that, and enter. That should be it. I should be able to connect to this. Oh, sorry, forgot the password I used. It's a good one. So I forgot the password I used. What can I do? I can actually come here and reset the password. It's actually very possible. So I can go for password reset, reset the password. So I forgot the password I typed now, probably use something different, but let me see. Okay, it's easy user, not Azure user. That explains why it's failing, right? Let me just cancel it. Try it again. As a user, password. Right. So right. So the username was wrong. So I'm connected to this VM now. So it's like saying this user is connected to this. So for now, you can make any changes you want to make. You can do ls to list your files. There's no files here. You can do df. This is basically inside the Linux VM. Df as an h to view the different folders, the different directories, file system mounted in your VM. That's basically it in a nutshell. So guys, any questions? Any questions? Anything you would like me to explain? Anything you feel like, oh, this guy is doing magic here?
So this is for Linux. So just in case
yeah, this is for Linux. Yeah, this is a Linux VM.
If you have not seen a Linux VM before, this is for Linux.
Okay. All right. So I'll stop sharing now. Thank you all. Hope to see you guys next week again. Bye-bye. We'll look on another more interesting topic. Our target is to wrap up AZ 104 before the year runs out. We'll look at the next stage to go, the next thing to explore. Maybe we'll explore AZ 305 and talk more about Azure resources. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Again, please, if you have not registered for the Microsoft Ignite, I will encourage you guys to ensure you register for the Microsoft Ignite. There's so many things to benefit from, and it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure with speaking with you guys again. Shugo, anything for us?
Well, from my side, I'm planning to have like a season of AI events to start soon. So after this AZ 104, so we can go into the discussing about Azure AI, different series to start with. So I will be taking on that. I think it will be interesting to be part of that section going forward, since AI is quite rampant now.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. So we'll end up our session today. If you have any questions you would like to discuss with us one-on-one, please go back to the group and drop your message. We'll attend to you again. See you guys next week. Thank you so much, guys. Bye for now.
Guys. Bye. Ciao.